The day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life turned into my worst nightmare. I could still recall the scent of fresh roses filling the grand hall, the soft hum of excited guests, and the weight of my pristine white dress trailing behind me. Everything had been planned to perfection, except for one thing. The groom never showed up. I stood at the altar, my heart pounding as seconds stretched into eternity. The murmurs grew louder, my bridesmaids shifted uneasily, my mother clutched my hands, and the officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. But Aiden was nowhere to be seen. Then came the message. A single text, "I can't do this. Sorry." I read those words over and over again, willing them to change. My hands trembled as my father gently took my phone, his face dark with anger. The guests who had once beamed with joy now watched me with pity and shock. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I lifted my chin, steadied my voice, and said, "It seems there won't be a wedding today." Then, without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the broken remnants of my dream. But the pain didn't end there. The days that followed were a blur of heartbreak and humiliation. Everywhere I went, people whispered. My social media overflowed with messages of sympathy and outrage. Friends who once admired our relationship now avoided me, unsure of what to say. The wedding that was meant to unite us had instead left me alone in the ruins of what once was. And Aiden. He had vanished. No explanation. No closure. Just silence. For weeks, I drowned in misery, replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for what I had done wrong. We had been happy, hadn't we? The night before the wedding, he had held my hands, kissed me gently, and whispered promises of forever. So why did he leave? I hated him. But hatred soon gave way to something else. Determination. If Aiden thought he had broken me, he was wrong. I refused to be the woman who spent her life crying over a man who had abandoned her. So, I picked up the pieces of my shattered heart and moved forward. Then life threw me a curveball. 2 months later, I stood in my bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test in my shaking hands. Positive. A tear slid down my cheek, but this time it wasn't just sadness. It was fear, disbelief, and something unexpected, hope. Aiden may have left, but he had also left behind something far more precious. Our child. For the first time since my world had fallen apart, I had a purpose. I wasn't just living for myself anymore. I had a baby to protect, to love, to cherish. That night I made a decision. I would raise this child alone. Aiden had given up his right to be a part of our lives the moment he walked away. I didn't search for him. I didn't beg him to come back. Instead, I left the city where our love had once flourished and moved to a small town where no one knew my past. I worked harder than ever to build a future for my baby, ensuring he would never feel the void of his father's absence. When my son Ethan was born, everything changed. He was perfect. His tiny fingers curled around mine. His soft cries filled the quiet nights, and his innocent eyes reminded me every day why I had to keep going. I had lost love, but in return, I had gained something even greater. A new beginning. I thought I had buried the past, left the pain behind me. But fate had other plans. It was a warm afternoon when I decided to take Ethan to the park. He had just started walking, his chubby little legs wobbling with excitement as he clung to my fingers. Laughter filled the air, birds chirped, and a dog barked in the distance. I was smiling, genuinely happy for the first time in a long time, until I heard a voice that sent ice through my veins. "Sophia." I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs as I turned. And there he was. He looked different, older perhaps, but his once carefree eyes now held something I couldn't quite place. Regret. Guilt. Then his gaze dropped to the baby in my arms, and realization dawned on his face. He already knew. "Is he?" His voice trailed off, unable to finish the question. I didn't answer. I didn't owe him an explanation. But the truth was evident in Ethan's eyes. Eyes that mirrored his father's. Aiden reached out as if to touch him, but I stepped back, my protective instincts flaring. You lost the right to this moment a long time ago, Aiden, I said coldly. He flinched as if my words had struck him, but I didn't care. He had left me when I needed him most. Now he had to live with the consequences. But something in his expression told me this wasn't over. He wasn't going to walk away this time. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. The next morning I sat across from Aiden in a small cafe, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly, my nerves frayed. He looked like a man burdened by the weight of his own choices. For a moment we just stared at each other, the silence between us thick with unspoken pain. Finally he spoke. Sophia, I never stopped loving you. Scoff. You have a funny way of showing it. He exhaled sharply, clasping his hands together. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had no choice. I arched a brow. No choice. You had every choice in the world, Aiden. And you chose to destroy us. His jaw clenched. No. I chose to protect you. He frowned. Protect me. From what? His gaze darkened. From my father. Confusion washed over me. Your father. Aiden nodded, his expression grim. I never told you the full truth about my family, Sophia. I kept it from you because I wanted to shield you from the chaos that comes with my last name. I folded my arms. What are you talking about? He sighed. My father is a powerful man. Not just in business but in ways you don't want to imagine. He has influence. Dangerous influence. The night before our wedding, he called me and told me that if I went through with the marriage, he would ruin you. He'd destroy your career, your future, everything you had worked for. He wanted to control me, and marrying you meant I was breaking away from his grasp. He wasn't going to let that happen. My breath hitched. So you left to protect me. Pain flickered across his face as he nodded. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I stared at him, my heart torn between anger and understanding. For so long, I had thought Aiden had abandoned me out of cowardice. But now I wasn't sure what to feel. Could I forgive him? Could I let him back in after everything? I didn't have the answer. But for the first time, I knew that my past wasn't as simple as I had believed. And neither was my future. I never imagined I'd be standing in front of Aiden again, hearing the truth I had longed for yet dreaded. His voice trembled as he spoke, confessing the reason behind his disappearance. I thought if I disappeared you would hate me, he admitted, his eyes filled with regret. You'd move on, and he wouldn't have a reason to go after you. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You should have told me, Aiden, I said, my voice laced with pain. We could have faced him together. He looked away, shame shadowing his face. I didn't want you to fight my battles. I thought I was protecting you. I let his words sink in, my mind racing. He hadn't left because he didn't love me. He had left because he did. But did that justify the agony he had put me through? Aiden, I whispered, my voice barely holding steady. I suffered. My breath hitched as I fought against the wave of emotions threatening to consume me. You thought you were protecting me, but you left me alone to pick up the pieces. And then I found out I was pregnant. His face paled, his lips parting in shock. I didn't know. But you could have, I interrupted, my voice breaking. You chose to leave. And now, after all this time, you expect, what? A second chance. He swallowed hard. I don't expect anything, Sophia. I just want to be in his life. Please let me be his father. I looked down at Ethan, sleeping peacefully in his stroller, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. For a year, I had carried the weight of betrayal, believing Aiden had abandoned me. Now the truth stood before me, painful and undeniable. He had made a terrible mistake, but did that undo the loneliness, the shame, the nights I cried myself to sleep? I studied Aiden, searching for the man I had once loved so deeply. He looked different, exhausted, worn down by his own suffering. Yet, I couldn't ignore the anger still boiling inside me. I don't know if I can forgive you, I admitted, my voice raw with emotion. His shoulders slumped, but he nodded. I understand. I won't beg you to. But please don't shut me out of his life. I lost you once. I can't lose my son too. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I lay awake, my mind in turmoil. Aiden wanted to be part of Ethan's life. But was that what was best for my son? I had built a world for Ethan, one without uncertainty or heartbreak. Letting Aiden back in meant opening old wounds, risking everything. Just as I tried to push the thoughts away, my phone buzzed. A message from Aiden. I know I don't deserve another chance, but please meet me one last time. For Ethan's sake. I should have ignored it. I should have told him to leave us alone. But instead I typed back, fine. Tomorrow. The park. The next day, I sat on a bench, my heart pounding as Aiden knelt before Ethan. His hands trembled as he spoke softly. Hey little guy. I'm your daddy. Ethan stared at him, curiosity flickering in his innocent eyes. Then, to my surprise, he giggled and grabbed a handful of Aiden's shirt, tugging it playfully. Aiden let out a shaky laugh, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Can I take him for a walk? Aiden asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated before nodding. I'll come too. We walked together, watching Ethan babble and point at everything around him. Aiden turned to me, his voice filled with quiet awe. He's incredible, Sophia. You did an amazing job raising him. I swallowed hard. I had no choice. He flinched at my words but didn't argue. I want to be in his life, however you'll allow me to be. Even if I have to prove myself every day. And prove himself he did. Over the following weeks, Aiden became a consistent presence. He never missed a visit. Ethan warmed up to him quickly, but for me it was harder. Each interaction was a battle between my lingering resentment and the undeniable truth. I still loved him. One night, after putting Ethan to bed, Aiden walked me to my apartment door. Do you think we could ever fix this? He asked hesitantly. I stiffened. You mean us? He nodded. I know I don't deserve you, but I love you. I never stopped. Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. Love isn't enough, Aiden. Not after everything. His face fell, but he nodded. Then let me prove to you that I'll never leave again. Time passed and trust, though fragile, began to rebuild. Aiden attended doctor's appointments, joined US for park outings, and tucked Ethan into bed. We sought counseling, facing our past head-on. Slowly, the walls between us crumbled. Empathy replaced resentment. Hope replaced fear. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Ethan play, Aiden turned to me. Sophia, there's something I need to do. I need to confront my father. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I saw the determination in his eyes. Are you sure? He nodded. I have to. Was. For Ethan. Aiden left to face the man who had controlled his life for too long. The hours crawled by as I waited, my heart pounding with fear. When he finally returned, he looked exhausted but resolute. He knows about Ethan, Aiden said. And he knows that he can't control me anymore. A sense of pride swelled in me. Aiden had taken the first step toward breaking free from the chains of his past. And with that we focused on our future. Months passed. We built new memories, shared laughter, and slowly, love found its way back into the cracks of our broken hearts. One crisp autumn morning, as we walked through the park, Aiden stopped under an old oak tree and turned to me, his eyes full of emotion. Do you remember this spot? He asked, a hint of a smile on his lips. I did. It was where we had spent countless afternoons, lost in love. How could I forget? I whispered. Taking my hands in his, he said, We've been through so much, Sophia. More than most couples ever do. But through it all, my love for you has only grown stronger. I can't imagine my life without you and Ethan. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face as I looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and love. My heart, once shattered, now beat with hope. Yes, Aiden, I whispered, my voice breaking with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. A year ago, he had left me at the altar. A year later he saw me again, this time with our son. The moment I said yes to him again, a wave of relief and fear crashed over me. The past year had been filled with heartbreak, betrayal, and uncertainty. But now, standing on the precipice of something new, I realized Aiden had fought his way back. Not just for Ethan, not just for me, but for the family he had abandoned. But love, no matter how deep, wasn't enough on its own. We had learned that the hard way. This time we had to do things differently. We wouldn't rush into wedding plans. We had already tried that once, and it had ended in devastation. This time, it wasn't about the grand gestures, the extravagant ceremony, or the approval of the world. It was about us. We focused on rebuilding the foundation we had shattered. Every week, we dedicated time to our relationship, through open conversations, through counseling, through quiet moments of just being together. The pain of the past still lingered, and healing wasn't instant. Took patience, took effort. But Aiden was determined, and for the first time I allowed myself to believe in him again. One evening, as we sat on my balcony, the baby monitor beside us filled with Ethan's soft breaths, Aiden turned to me. "Have you thought about where we should live?" he asked carefully. It was a conversation we had been avoiding. I had built a life for myself and Ethan without him. Could I truly share my space again? "I have," I admitted, my voice steady. "And I think we should find a new place together. Somewhere that belongs to both of us." The way Aiden's face lit up sent warmth through my chest. "A fresh start," he murmured. And just like that, we began looking for a home, a place where our new beginning could truly take root, away from the ghosts of our past. But not everyone in my life was ready to embrace this reconciliation. Telling my family and friends was difficult. The people who had held me together when Aiden walked away now struggled to accept him back into my life. The hardest conversation was with my mother. She had been my rock through the devastation, and I knew she still carried resentment toward him. "You're engaged?" she asked, her voice cautious. He nodded. "Yes, and I know what you're thinking, Mom. But things are different now." "He's different." She sighed, sipping her coffee. "It's hard for me to trust him after what he did to you, Sophia. But if you truly believe in him, if you really think he's changed, then I will support you." Relief flooded through me. "I do," I whispered. "I really do." While my mother offered cautious support, Aiden's father was an entirely different battle. The man who had once controlled Aiden's every decision, the man who had nearly destroyed us, had to be confronted. The tension was thick when we arrived at his family estate. The older man sat across from us, his expression unreadable. "So," he said coldly, "you're going to marry her again?" Aiden didn't waver. "Yes. And nothing you say or do will change that." His father scoffed. "You're throwing away everything I built for you. For what? Some woman and a child." Anger burned through me, but Aiden squeezed my hand under the table, grounding me. "Not just some woman," he said firmly. "The love of my life. The mother of my son. My family." For the first time, his father looked genuinely taken aback. "I never wanted to control you, Aiden," he murmured. "I only wanted what was best for you." Aiden shook his head. "No, you wanted what was best for you. You manipulated me, scared me into making a decision that destroyed my life. But I won't let you do that anymore." His father exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. He suddenly looked older, tired. "If this is the life you want, I won't stop you. But don't expect me to be a part of it." Aiden's grip on my hand tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Then that's your choice. But I won't live in your shadow anymore." As we walked out of the estate, Aiden let out a long breath, as though years of tension had finally lifted from his shoulders. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He nodded. "For the first time in my life, yes. I'm finally free." 6 months later we stood at the altar again. But this time there were no doubts, no fear, no runaway groom. Our wedding was small, intimate, just close friends and family. I wore a simple lace gown, and Aiden looked at me as if I was his entire world. Ethan, now a little older and filled with endless energy, was our ring bearer. He giggled as he toddled down the aisle, making everyone laugh. When it was time for our vows, Aiden took my hands, his eyes brimming with emotion. "Sophia, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I walked away from you," he said. "I thought I was protecting you, but all I did was hurt you. Every day since then, I have fought to prove that I will never make that mistake again. I promise to love you, to stand by you, and to cherish every moment we have together." Tears slid down my cheeks as I whispered my own vows. "Aiden, you broke me once. But you also healed me. Love isn't perfect. It's messy, it's painful, but it's also beautiful. Choose you. Every single day. Just as you choose me." When we kissed, the past finally let go of its grip on us. We were no longer the broken couple we once were. We were something stronger. Life after the wedding wasn't perfect. There were still challenges. Learning to co-parent, ensuring we communicated openly, making sure we never let old wounds fester. But we faced them together. Aiden became the father Ethan deserved. And every time I watched them together, my heart swelled with love. One evening, as I stood in the doorway, watching Aiden read Ethan a bedtime story, I realized something. Despite everything we had been through, all the heartbreak, the pain, the years lost, this was exactly where we were meant to be. If you like this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like these only at StoryTimes.